Let's turn now to a topic that makes many of us uncomfortable: death and the process of dying. For WA's Australian of the Year, it is at the centre of her work. Professor Samar Aoun is a researcher and an advocate for end-of-life care, and I spoke to her about this very important topic.
Well, Madeleine, there are too many people, Australian people, who are not dying the way they wish to or in a place they wish to. And that's not very difficult. If we could get the community more involved to make sure that people die according to their wishes and values and make their wishes and values known beforehand to their loved ones through advanced care planning, through getting the community more educated. And we talk about death literacy and also grief literacy. How do you support the bereaved? So death is a social event with a medical component. It is not a medical event with a social component the way it's become now. It's become too professionalized, too medicalized. So really the community needs to claim back that. We used to do it really well in the past, and there is no reason why we can't do it now, because once the community is an equal partner in delivering good care towards the end of life, everyone will benefit. We have a community that's really well educated, and we're not relying on health services who can't do the whole range of, the work that needs to be done towards the end of life.
What would that look like in practice? What would you like to see the community more involved in?
What we have trialled in Western Australia, particularly in the southwest, is a volunteer program called the Compassionate Connectors program, where we had lovely connectors connecting people back into their community to get the practical and social support that they needed. And that proved really successful, because we've increased the social connectedness, doubled the social networks around those people. And these are more affordable, sustainable networks than having to keep going to the hospital, because there's no need to keep going to hospital when you have the support in your community, unless there is a very dire clinical need. In general, people who have got a life-limiting illness and they're dying, only 5% of their time is spent with a health professional, whether it's a doctor or a nurse or allied health professional. 95% of their time, it's with their own communities, their families, their friends, their pets, and sadly, too many are alone. So we need to bring them back connected to their communities, particularly at the time of their greatest needs, because the problem is not with death. The problem is with the journey to dying, where people feel they're socially isolated.
Yeah, because in so many Australian communities, particularly in Anglo communities, it's a generalisation, but we're not very good at talking about death, whereas other cultures are much better at it, and death seems to be more a part of life.
Exactly, and we can learn from those cultures. There's so many cultures, as we say, they do death well, because they're preparing along their life, they're talking about it. Yeah, the Anglo-Saxon, the Western culture is a death-denying culture, and that's really to the detriment of people. In the next 25 years, the number of people who are dying is going to double, and we can't have a palliative care service in every Australian suburb, and there's no need for that. If the community starts having those conversations, preparing their loved ones, talking about their values and wishes, so that when they die, their loved ones know what they wanted, they do it the same way, and that brings relief to the families themselves.
How did you get into this area of work, Professor Aoun?
Yes, it's interesting. I never really dwelt on this, but having been asked this question before, in 2012, like 11 years ago, my dad died, and I was rushing to my workplace for a meeting. So I rang to say, look, my dad died, I'm just gonna stay and book my flight, because I come originally from Lebanon. Anyway, I did that, and I walked into my workplace again, and no one said anything. And I said to myself, that's not okay. I'm really, in grief, in pain, and none of my colleagues have acknowledged that. Following day, I was on a flight, and it was a totally different thing, the funeral. The community looked after it. It was beautiful. I felt like I was carried in a cloud of love and affection. and the dignity and the respect. And we had 3 days of mourning where we laughed, we cried, we ate together. And I felt like my acute grief was really resolved in 3 days by the time I came back. So on my way back in the flight, I thought, right, this is it. Death, dying, grief and loss belongs to the community. They do it well. So let's get together, you know, when I come back to Australia and see how we can start compassionate communities.
It's such important work that you've been doing, Professor Aoun. You've undoubtedly benefited the lives of so many people already, so many more to come. Thanks so much for speaking to News Breakfast and best of luck on Australia Day.
Thank you very much, Madeleine. Lovely to speak to you.
Like all of the Australians of the Year, doing incredibly important work, and it was so great to have a chat to her. Best of luck to her and all of the other nominees for Australian of the Year.
OK, let's take it away.